Welcome to Round the Table, where we like to say that when it comes to these sessions, everything is on the table and nothing is off it. So, when it comes to discussing our faith openly, we want it to be a time and a place where we can grow in our relationship with God and also developing our identity as Christians. So, I'm going to do some introductions for the team. So while I'm doing that, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to tag somebody else into the session while I'm doing the introductions. So over in the top left, well, I'm hoping he's still on the top left, we have Apostle Darren John Giles. So Darren, you're on mute. So if you can say hey to everyone.
Hey everybody, nice to have you with us.
Cool. And on the bottom left, in the yellow corner, we have Hannah. Hannah, say hey.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining.
And just below me should be the lovely Layla. Layla, say hey.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining.
Okay, so for those of you that are watching on Facebook and YouTube, I just want to explain a little bit about how we're going to try and make the session flow. So Darren is going to be more or less leading the conversation that we're going to be having about what makes us feel distant from God. So he's going to already have some provocative points actually for us to have a discussion. And we very much want your interaction and your participation as well. So do feel free to put some comments, put some questions in the chat. And I'm going to be here moderating, and I will stop at various points to pick up your comments or your questions. But do bear with me because I'm monitoring quite a few things here. All right. So after we've had our conversation, one of the things that we like to do at Kingdom Life Ministries is that whenever we are having conversation or having dialogue, we like to be able to round up with some sort of conclusion on the matter. Even if it doesn't address every single point, we like to be able to say that we're going away with some sort of thing that we can take away. And that's what Darren is going to help us with at the end. And then I will just sum up with some announcements as to when we're going to have our next our next Kingdom Life Ministries online session and some other bits and pieces. Okay, so over to you, Darren.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us, those who are tuning in today. So as Vernette said, we are going to be having a discussion today around a couple of things really. So around kind of feeling distant from God, whether that's happened to you or not. So we're going to be looking at that and what do you do when you feel kind of distant from God? How does that happen? And also about dealing with guilt. And this is coming right off the back of some of the suggestions that we got from you guys. So yeah, it's important that you keep sending us your topics. As you send us your topics, we'll pick one each time and we'll go through it. So whoever sent that in, thanks very much. Hopefully you'll hear some stuff today that will help trigger some thought and also kind of help you with those things. So yeah. So guys, hope we're all ready to discuss, brains working. Mine's on its way. So yeah. All right, so let's just start. So first bit I'll just throw out there then, guys, is let's start by talking about being distant from God or feeling that you're distant from God. Let's start there. And so I don't know, has anyone ever had a time where they actually felt distant from God? And maybe you want to kind of just share about our own experiences a bit.
Okay, let me go first. When you say being distant from God, it's like that's two things for me. So there's been being distant from God because I've been doing something that I should not be doing, and I therefore don't want to hear it from God. And so therefore I move myself away from him. And then there's also being distant where I'm like asking for something and I'm really like I'm doing the things that I think should be doing, which is, the prayer, the fasting, the things that I should be doing to hear better from God. And I feel like I'm not hearing anything from him. And that kind of makes me feel distant. So to give you an example, I think it was last year, beginning of last year, beginning of the year before. So I'm in a process. I'm building up my consultancy at the moment. I've been doing work in Africa with a couple of banks, and then I got out of nowhere. I got a call from the CEO from the banks. They needed some support and designing, putting together and facilitating and delivering the strategic senior board's strategic retreat for the year at the beginning of the year. And I wasn't expecting it. I was like, wow. And I believe that it was from God. So obviously they sent paid for everything. I got over there. I delivered I was there for about a week and a half, did the work. It was fantastic experience. There was loads of talk about, we would like to hire you. So I left Africa with, I was really excited. I was like, this is God. I'd heard a word. I knew that, this felt like the right thing. It was fantastic. Came back to England, started literally shifting things, really thinking about relocating. 1 month went by. I hadn't heard. I was really pressuring. They asked me for a proposal. Because of the strategical way week, I knew what they wanted. So I spent time writing a proposal, put it together, sent it to them. The second month passed. And it was just, and I've been doing the thing that you do as business people, follow-up emails, how are you, doing all of that. And as I started getting frustrated because I wasn't getting anything. And I'd already started shifting my life to relocate. So I started getting frustrated, and out of that frustration, I started getting angry. So I turned to God. What, did you not organize this? Did you not? And you guys can imagine what went after that. Did you not da 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 da? And did you not da 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 da? I'm really angry with you now, God. And then there was that thing of, okay, and then I'm going to wait. Maybe I'm not waiting enough. Maybe my faith is not enough. So, you go back, you do I'm going to fast, I'm going to pray, I'm going to get up this time and pray and all that kind of stuff that I felt that maybe it was me that was the problem. And I kept doing these things in a hope to move God to give me what I wanted. And that wasn't happening. So I felt like God wasn't listening. And out of the frustration and the frustration turned to anger, I started distant. I felt myself distant. I was like, I don't want to speak to you anymore. Like, you did this and you said this, and pulled out a book of prophecy. But it is written. Your word to me said blah, blah, blah. And the more frustrated I get, the more angry I get. The more angry I got with God, the more I decided I don't want to speak to you. And I just, over the space of a couple of months, I wasn't getting up praying. I just felt really distant. I distanced myself from God because I was frustrated because of that situation. And this process took about half a year of just being angry with God. And it literally felt slowly by slowly I was moving, and God was, I felt that. I felt that I was doing well. I felt like it was God that was moving away from me at that time. So that's my example of just feeling distant from God.
So
I'll say to add support. Go on.
No, I was going to say, so Layla, what it sounds like you're saying is that in terms of you feeling distant from God, was it because you pulled back?
Yeah, I think, and the things I didn't realize that I was pulling back, but I was frustrated and angry with God. And in that anger, then when you're angry with someone, you don't want to speak to them. You don't want to call. I want to speak to God.
No, this is true.
I need to be still, and and because of the frustration and anger, my stillness was like, I ain't gonna say nothing. Yeah, I'm gonna wait for you to come, and then it wasn't coming. Then I get angry again, and it just became this vicious cycle of frustration, anger. God, you're not hearing me. I got quite furious and vigorous in my acts. So I started doing things. Okay, maybe I've done something wrong. Okay, I'm going to do this. So let me spend time with you. And it just, yeah, it became a cycle.
No, I understand that. That makes sense. Sorry, Hannah, you was going to say something.
No, I was going to say that I think I relate more so with a lot of the flood of emotions that come after when you feel like you are distant from God. I was going to say, I was going to ask you a question later as well, just in the back of what you're saying. Did you feel like at the time you was also still engaged with a lot of sort of traditional things, so still kind of taking part, maybe doing a bit of Bible study here, still trying to find the time to pray? Like, how was that? How was the dynamics of that, from feeling frustrated but still kind of maybe engaging things?
You know what? I think because of my frustration, I wasn't, for example, I would worship because I just want to worship the King. Just because. But frustration had me, okay, I'm going to sing the song and I'm really going to believe it. And because I've sang all these lists of songs, you should listen to me. Because look, I've told you how much I care about you and how much I love you and how much I appreciate you. So give me what I want. Please. No, but seriously, Lord, like, please, I beg you. I mean, I've been good. So then I started listing the goodness, the good things I've been doing. I haven't done this, I haven't done that. I've been to every Bible study, you know, I pay money into the church. I started listing, like trying to remind God that I'm a good child and therefore give me what I want. And the more I kept doing that, and I think for me, what I realized is that it was my desire. I wanted what I wanted, and God had to give it to me. And I went through the Bible and picked scriptures to justify why He should give me what I wanted. So, yeah.
That's quite interesting. So, I think for me, even just off of what you said there about the whole thing about your expectation, I think, you know, the whole like, I've done this and, you know, I've done what you've told me to and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's quite interesting about sometimes when we do go through those situations where we have certain expectations of God that may not be necessarily true, even though we believe that He exists.
Yeah.
Maybe in the mix. I don't know, Hannah, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think definitely we put a lot of expectations on God that sometimes we don't even fully understand, know what that even looks like in reality too, especially when we maybe read about things in the Bible, or even, I think the trap that I fell into a lot of time is the comparison thing. So I get jealous and like, oh, why does it look like something's happening in their life and God's doing something in their life, not mine? But a lot of the times it's come to that realization of, oh, hold on, it's my understanding and what I've known and what I've not known, and how I've pursued to sort of understand what those things are in the light of God's eyes, not my eyes. I think just to add to like just a time that I felt distant, I think would be many times. I think if I can sort of put a divide in it, I felt distant before I even came and kind of dedicated my life to Christ, because I felt distant from God. Felt empty, you know, oh Lord, it's my life, you know, and I thought that would solidify it. And it did, until I felt distant from God, having now given my life to Christ and having now kind of committed myself and submitted myself in that way, and then falling back into a place where I'm like, I feel distant again. But I thought, when I came and repented and I gave my life, that was it. But why is it now that I feel like this again? And that was, like Lady was explaining, after I had done something wrong, more than one occasion, and having to come to God to kind of rebuild what that looks like. So in a nutshell, like, there's been many occasions, but I think back to one like years ago. It was the time I just felt my heart just sort of pulled in different directions, because it wasn't that I didn't know the truth. It's harder when you know the truth. And then you come to that realization, you're like, oh, and because there's a lot of things to confront. And I remember being in, again, one too many times, just in wrong relationships, being with people that I should not be, and I know I shouldn't be, kind of drowning out the voice of God. In a time you wouldn't really see it because you're kind of deceived by your own sort of thoughts, saying one thing, but then I'm doing another thing. And on top of that, you've hurt people around you if they've kind of given you advice and wisdom and you've not followed through with that. So even just your own relationships, all those things kind of, for me personally, I've experienced. And because of all of that and my own actions, I've been in those places where I just felt so far from God, even though I was saying I'm a Christian. In the same way that I was before I even came to Christ. And my mind just couldn't understand how on earth, when I got here, and two, how is this possible if if God's supposed to be close to me and living in me, and like I don't know if I can come and ask for and say I'm sorry, and then it's like, okay, what are you sorry for? But then, you know, just so much things actually come along with that, which I'm sure we'll probably explore as we kind of discuss. But yeah, I think the way Leila was talking about like the emotions, I was like, yeah, that the frustration and anger, and like, you, Lord, I need to blame someone, so you're going to get it in that sense, because everybody else around me seems to get this too. So who else? Yeah. Okay, God, because you had said, and I came to Christ, and now look where I am, and you said you was going to come and save me. You know, all those things, the frustration, the anger. For me, it was that prolonged time of being distant from God, but then the emotions that came with that. So the hurt, the anger, the frustration, and then in the comparison of people, then the jealousy, and then all of a sudden you've got a clump of mud with all these emotions on top of just feeling distant in the first place, on top of actually even just kind of processing the wrong actions that you had done as well. So that's what I said many times because it's been different. So yeah,
it's interesting kind of hearing from everyone because obviously, and I've kind of spoken to a lot of people over the years that, you know, deal with similar things, being distant from God and stuff. And because I'm like Mary Poppins, you know, she measured herself and she was practically perfect in every way. So I have no idea what you lot are talking about. So, you know, I can only look on. No, but seriously, I do kind of always interested to hear about it, because actually for me, it's not something that I've ever experienced. Not because I'm perfect, that's just not one of the issues that I struggle with. I've never had any doubts or any issues about that. My issues have always been on my end. It's like, yeah, God's great, but Darren, you're a bit of a liability, really. So, you know, I know he'll keep his end. Whether I'll keep my end, that was my thing. I'm just not convinced of whether or not you can ever live up to this, what God's offering you. So my thing was on the flip side of that. But what I'm kind of interested in then is, so, because something that you were saying, Hannah, which we'll probably touch on, is that you talked about the emotions, and so did you, Leila, while going through the midst of that, because I guess when you feel kind of distance from God, I think one of the things that I'm getting, it's not a void, and it's not that you're just suspended in space, because what you got highlighted is that other things come and fill that space, whether it's anger, whether it's whatever. So it's not that, and I think an important thing is if you are feeling distant from God, it's not that you're not feeling anything, you are feeling something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's easy to forget in the midst of it. So I guess what I would kind of be interested to hear is, when you're in that space, feeling distant from God, obviously life is continuing, and a lot of time Christian life is continuing. So what does that look like while being distant from God? Because I think sometimes we've developed an interesting habit as Christians of being able to kind of still carry on doing something while not doing something at the same time. You know, the show must go on. So yeah, what did that kind of look like practically? So you're feeling this, but you're still a Christian, and you're still supposed to be living the Christian life that you're distant from. So how does that even work?
Well, I think like from from the times in my walk, it's avoidance, isn't it?
Oh, great.
That's all it is. It's avoidance in that. Uh, well, the best way that I can think of to like provide an analogy is it's kind of like when you might like have like a little thing going on with you and a mate or something, and you know that things are not quite as they should be, and so you're the both of you could know that things are not quite as they should be, but it might be on my end to I need to kind of resolve it. Um, but then it's kind of like you still try to carry on as normal. You still try to do certain things. You still try to relate. You still try to.
Like I said, during the example that I gave, I was still fasting. I was still doing acts. There was a lot of doing. So I was still going to church. I was still part of Bible study, leading Bible study. Sorry. Study, worship it. Like, but the one thing I would say is, I think what I'll say is, I was doing a lot of church stuff that was in groups. So the app stuff. So I would go to church and be there and be part of what was happening there. It was when I wasn't around people, the Christian stuff I'm supposed to be doing when I'm not around people that, like Lynette said, I was avoiding. So it was the sitting down with my word by myself. Speaking to God, praying with God, spending that quiet time with God. I was just totally avoiding that. I didn't want no. I was like, no, I'm going to go with the group. So it was great. And sometimes, I would go to church, the pastor would give really great words that would uplift my spirits, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool, God, then I think in that service, my heart would be turning and that I might have a, hey, how you doing, Father? Thank you. I appreciate you moment. But as soon as I left, that, like you said, the feeling would come back. And don't get me wrong, I haven't even mentioned Holy Spirit that is constantly talking to me and I'm just avoiding him. So he says something, you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna go play a game. He said something like, oh, Netflix updates. Let me see what's new on Netflix. So like you said, you will always find something else to do. That's when all of a sudden, I had loads of events to go to. I was going to a lot of parties in that time. I mean, and it was, I was like, no, maybe God is sending me out while he's waiting to do my thing and I'm still going out, and no, but he doesn't. So I think for me, the emotions, the feelings in what I was going through and I realized is God was taking me through a process. But because the process was uncomfortable and it did not fit my assumptions and expectations of God and what he should be doing to fulfill my desire, the frustration just carried on. So I'll go to church and, like Hannah said, something fantastic would happen to someone else, an amazing word, and I'm like, yo, why are you speaking to them?
Where's mine?
And then again, bam, frustration, bam, anger, guilt, condemnation, the cycle starts. So but I was still, to answer your question, Darren, I was still doing church stuff.
Yeah. I think, pretty much the same, I think, for me, during those times where you still continue day to day living of what that looks like. And that emphasis on like doing a lot of what would be seen to be good works on the outside. A lot of my sort of focus was like, okay, I need to do this, I need to make sure I'm doing lots of all these good things as part of just things that I enjoyed doing, but it became more intentional that I needed to make sure that I kept up with doing these good things in life, because if I felt like inside that I was, in a sense, falling down and distant from God on one thing on the inside, on the outside, I can't afford, in a sense, for other things to feel like it's crumbling too. So that upkeep of this needs to work, or I need to be out here doing things so that, life feels like it's going somewhere. Because how I felt was very much like, I don't know how to get out from this place. I don't know how long it's going to take me to really overcome from feeling like this. But as long as, I guess in my mind, as long as I was sort of still, attending church and going to give and joining with prayers, even that became a limitation of how much I probably could even give into my church communities too. And I don't think when I look back over different times that I was fully aware of that, but I felt it heavily, of the wanting to do more, but feeling like I can't do more because of how I was feeling and how distant I felt from God too. So that whole reality, the reality of what that looked like was still doing things, even though I felt like I wasn't going nowhere. And then actually becoming more frustrated, like Layla was saying, you do again have those well of emotions that come up that you can't even celebrate in someone else's achievements and things like that. I think I remember telling my bestie like only a few months ago, there was a time where I felt distant from God, and I just felt so jealous towards her because because everything in my life seemed to be at a standstill. And everything in her, she's like, oh yeah, God's doing this amazing thing. I mean, it was like coming in like news reports.
Praise the Lord.
Outside,
Yeah.
Literally, it's like, yeah. But to fair, looking back at the time, I would feel it, but I wouldn't allow myself to let that feeling come to full manifestation, like to the surface. So it's like I had to lock this thing down. Like, no, I'm feeling like this, but but even that limited how much I could celebrate with her. And being able to even kind of confront even my own frustrations or feelings of at times where I felt that I was distant from God and not being able to celebrate with my own, church family and, my bestie at the time, when she had just different things going for her that God was really doing. I saw it as God ain't doing nothing for me. Why should I celebrate with you? But I'm a Christian, so I have to, so you have there's obligations you put on yourself to feel obligated to now take part, to feel like you have to because of the confession that you said you had, but then still go on knowing and feeling that you don't feel any closer to God than you were before, but yet still carry on. And I think I laugh now at it, but at the same time it can be quite a really trying place, because not only do you learn a lot about yourself and things that you need to confront, but I think it does expose in a weird way just at times how, for me at the time, like how distant I was from God, because none of that screams any of the characteristics that I was claiming that I had maybe like 2-3 months before, like, oh, I love you, I'm gonna pray for you. I don't want to do any of that. But I'll go to church and be like, yeah, I'll pray for you. Go back home, I ain't praying for no one. So yeah, it's a mix. You just get in this sort of deceptive just cycle of doing things making you feel like you're going forward, but then actually in the inside nothing is really happening, even though life around you is still happening in that sense.
Yeah, and I guess it can be a bit of like a bit of a quicksand, because you're around other Christians, and like, how it is whenever, especially if you're around church, it's like whenever you don't feel you're in the right place, suddenly everybody else looks super saved. Like everybody looks like they are literally sitting on the lap of Jesus. Somebody raises their hand and it's like you can see this glow around them. Everybody else is just so like saved. When you season chicken and the season has gone right down to the bone. Yeah, everybody's saved like that when the season is just
Spirit.
got the clove in there anyway. It's just like that kind of saved, man. Yeah, where it's deep, and there you are, this wretch on the outside, and actually sometimes the more that you're around other people is the further away you feel, and then it kind of becomes like a quicksand that you kind of don't get out of, because even that just makes it worse.
I think, yeah, as you're saying that, it just reminded me of even in that same season, I remember just feeling so like distant. But then I had this whole thing that everyone I was around, whether it was Christian or non-Christian, will pull me up on my own character and say for me, in my mind, as Holy Hannah. And in my mind, then I was like, yeah, I remember that season.
I still need a t-shirt.
And that's what I felt like. I felt like everyone kind of regarded me as to be this good person and to be like, you know, for God. And all in my inside was just like, I'm just not that person. So I started to deny the very thing that people were seeing or knew me to be, but because of how I was feeling and where I was at. And even if I didn't have the opportunity to express to them why I didn't receive or take on what they were saying, I felt a bit shut up in myself, to be honest. Because I had here Christians, non-Christians, calling out things that God had said to me and other people who were in Christ had said to me. And I'm like, how you got me out here like with these people? Why are they reminding me of that version of myself? Because that version of myself, I don't feel like that right now. And so I feel like a hypocrite right now. And now it brings up everything again. Or I find myself in situations where I'm either supporting young people or just people like either family or friends through situations. And sometimes when those situations mirror the things that I've gone through, and I'm here trying to give advice, and I'm here trying to help them say, you know, you should do this. I know, go speak to God. You know, like it'll be okay. And those things I'm not even really practicing for myself. So then you even feel even more overwhelmed with just like, who am I? I think I went through that season of, well, I don't know who I am. Like, who am I? Because one minute I'm here doing this, I'm saying that. Next minute I'm here and I'm saying that, doing that. And then I'm not really doing this. And I just feel so cool. And I think, again, that was another part of the reality of just those seasons.
I was going to say that I can relate on both sides of the fence, like Darren is saying, in that, you know, when you're in that space, you don't want to be around Christian people. At the end of the day, man, you don't want to, you know, because they're gonna come at you with all of the lingua, and they're gonna be like, you know, oh, you know, God's amazing, and you're like, right? And then, you know, and then as you said, Hannah, you know, like when it seems like that they're flying, do you know what I'm saying? And you're just there in the dust. Do you know what I mean?
And you're like, oh, shut up.
Literally.
That's what you want to say. That's what you really want to say. Oh, you know,
no, literally. And then, yeah, and then on the other hand, I've also been in that space where I've been connected to people that I know that they're in that space, but, you know, for whatever reason, you know, whether they may not feel they can discuss it with me or they don't want to discuss it, but you can feel it on them. Do you know what I mean? Like when you just, sometimes you just like, just say hi. You're not even doing, you know, all of your Christianese movements and everything. You just say hi, and there's a way, you know, because of what you represent to them as well. So I can kind of see like the both sides and understand it, that it's like, because, and sometimes I think about it and I'm like, well, because of what, if we were to understand what God is like, it's almost like, you know, because of his love, it's almost like you're so tangled up, it's not easy for you to just walk off kind of thing. It's either going to be that you can kind of try to stay in that place because, you know, sometimes we need to get over ourselves or what have you. But it's almost like, as you said, Hannah, like when you're surrounded by people like that, it's like when you don't want to hear nothing about God in that sense, you know, he sends people, you know, to remind you kind of thing, or the life that you've kind of built where you're saying, you know what, I want to serve God and all that, you find it like, I can't even do that, or I can't even do this now, because everything has its hallmark on it. So I find it quite interesting in that sense that particularly if guilt is a thing, if it is actually like something to do with something that we feel like we've done and we can't approach him. I think that one of the things that I learned is just how easy it is to believe things are untrue about how he sees me. That's what I found quite interesting, and that's what kind of in my experiences in the past, that's what's kind of kept me at bay in the first place, because I believe that this thing is so major, like that's it now, do you know what I mean? And then partly because I'm also condemning myself because I should have known better for the thing that, you know, that I'm caught up in, that I feel is keeping me away from him in the first place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's that's so true. And I think one of my favorites is sometimes when you meet someone and you say hello, and they're like, "Hello, how are you? Yeah, I haven't been to church in a while." And they're like, "I didn't ask you about that. We don't even go to the same church. Like, I didn't ask you nothing. All I said to you was hello." Like, you know, but in that hello, you heard everything but hello. The only thing you didn't hear me say was hello. And yeah, it is kind of interesting because, as V says, because your life is so actually wrapped up in the thing that you're trying to avoid. Like, another Christian just says hello, and you're not even looking at them, you're not even thinking about them, you're already thinking about everything that's going on with you.
Yeah.
But before we go further, because we're going to touch on a few things, and then we're going to touch on the guilt issue afterwards, and it's a kind of sort of separate but together, because you can't really separate them. I don't know if you had any questions or comments online before we
No, not yet. You can
carry on running. Okay, no, that's cool. That's cool. Just didn't want to leave anybody out. I think what's interesting in what we're all talking about is, I think everyone's very much talking about what they felt and how they thought. So let me, before I move in with maybe just a couple of bits, let me put another question then. So that's how we were, and that's the experience. What did you do to overcome it? And we'll go to that, and then if anybody has commented on anything that we said, anybody's got anything to say about what we said, please send in your comments, and we'll try and deal with that as we go along afterwards. But yeah, what did we do to get out of that space?
Okay. So what I did is, like you said, Darren, it was all about feelings. And to me, it's feelings like a quicksand. So frustration, anger. Then everything we just spoke about, not wanting to be around others, so avoidance. Then feeling alone. Then the guilt came. Then I started condemning myself. And I think I had to hit condemnation to realize, hold on, I'm not supposed to be here. Because Romans 8 says that there is no condemnation for those who believe in Christ. That's when I knew that it felt like I got there and I was like, no. I don't know this place. This is not this is not what the word says about this. I'm not supposed to be feeling this. And I think when I realized that I had I was in a place of condemnation for myself, about myself, about the things that I had been doing, that's when I was like, nah, Lord, I need to talk, because I don't know how I got here. If there's one thing that I'm sure of, this condemnation is not from you. That's what got me to start just to talk. And when I say talked, I screamed, I shouted, I cried, snot, everything. It's like once I literally turned, because that's what that scripture just came out of nowhere. Like, not like came out of nowhere, read it.
Hopefully, praise God.
No, Holy Spirit was there constantly trying to get me to engage. Do you understand? And that ate, and when I was just in like condemnation, that scripture came, and that's when I turned, and literally all I had to do was turn back to Father. That's all I did. I turned. And how did I turn? I started talking to him in truth, not the Father, I give you all glory. You are wonderful, Almighty God, majesty is thy name. Because I wasn't feeling that. So those are not that wasn't my reality. So every time I did that before was lip service. And I didn't want to do that. So I went to him. I turned. That's what I did. I told him about the frustrations. I told him what started off. I was like East London, innit? And anyway, but I let it all go. Yeah. That's what we do when we have a disagreement with someone, or when we're just in the natural. It's when we start talking to them and saying, well, you said this and you said that, and I did this and I did that, and this is how I felt. Yeah. And it's not fair. Mm. But in that just turning to him, by the time I finished my rant, which was like over an hour, and it was a rant, I just felt God's love on me, like tangibly on me. And that's when I said, I'm sorry. And literally just saying, God, you know what? I recognize that I've not been in a good place with you. I recognize that it's my feet. Do you understand? I recognize that it was my desires and my feelings that got me here. And sorry, repented. Sorry, Lord. And out of that, like the craziness that happened at that moment, everything just, all the things that I've been frustrated for months, not saying that my desire happens, but that's when I started hearing that actually the experience was teach me something, was to connect me to people. It wasn't about what my desire was. And that's what pulled me away from him. Mm-hmm. Going back to him to say, okay, I accept that I'm really looking at why I desire that thing so much with God. Mm-hmm. And then sitting down and actually asking the question, which I didn't ask at that time for that whole year, is, what do you think, God? What do you want me to do? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's how I got myself out. Literally just turned, regardless of how I was feeling. The feelings that were pushing me away from God was the feelings that I took to him. This is my father, and we started the conversation. So yeah.
That's really good. That's really, really good. Yeah. Anyone else want to kind of tag on to the end of that, or?
Yeah. Sorry, no, go Hannah. Go ahead.
I think just to follow on what they were saying, I think my reality was sort of. I think it was harder for me because even though I was aware of maybe just certain scriptures, for God to love the world, it gave his only son everyone should come. Those things that I remembered didn't really become tangible for me.
Yeah.
It was a struggle with the words. It was a struggle with words. Yeah. So for me, the reality of how I overcame things were talking, as they were saying, actually being able to confront the very thing that I was running away from, which is actually just dealing with the mess, dealing with it. And dealing with it, for me, was actually going to say sorry to those that I'd hurt. Actually being able to, and if there wasn't a kind of opportunity, or it wasn't appropriate in a sense to say sorry, I had to leave my heart that I understood that I was moving on from that place. I had to really kind of take responsibility for the wrongdoing and for my actions. And that's so hard, I think, to accept that, because a lot of the time our frustration, for me, it felt like I was just putting the blame on someone else, it's someone else's fault, then the actions. Then you've got yourself in that mess. Like, own up to it and get on with it in that sense. So it's kind of talking, being able to confess and actually talk with those who are supporting me, my church family, and in that conversation and dialogue, find my release or find a place where I just felt like a weight came off, because even just talking things out became a weight that came off for me in that sense, because I had it bottled up and I felt like everybody was sort of against me, and I don't know who I could trust, who I could talk to. I had to allow myself to step into that place where I had to be open and vulnerable enough to trust those who who at the time were around me and supporting me on that journey. And that was people that I considered to be close prior to wrongdoing, and who still was there, but I didn't know how to engage with the relationship because I knew that something had shifted for me. But that was based on how I was feeling and making assumptions of how they were perceiving me in this wretched state, in that sense. And so from being received by, a church family and those close friends that heard out and talked and converse, then I started to see, I guess, a visual pattern of God's love, in that even though I felt so far, I have someone here that is able to support and wants me to grow and wants me to move from this place. So I think a lot of it was, for me, was internal, like how do I allow myself to now be open? How do I allow myself now to be vulnerable with someone else, even though I feel very exposed and vulnerable right now? How do I make sense of that with God and my relationship? Because I wanted to see a physical, tangible sense of what that looked like. I wanted it to be logical in my mind of how do I move from this place to that place, and it wasn't a logical thing for me. So even in that step of actually having faith, it was like, sometimes when you go through stuff, do you ever feel like, this thing's gonna last forever? Like, this is the end of the world. Like, I can never move from this place. It's never gonna change. And I've been in that place so many times, but I just, in my heart, just feels so like, I can't wait until like 10 years I look back and actually come from this place. So you start hoping, the years ahead, and actually hoping the tomorrow of being free, or tomorrow of feeling a sense of release from how you're feeling. So yeah, so for me, it was all that mix in there, just the personal, of how I was physically feeling things, in my heart, pain, being able to converse with others and confess in that space, while still kind of pushing myself to take those steps to still to now intentionally engage with the very things that had been attendance and Bible study and prayers, and allow myself to speak up and to I guess just trusting again, in a sense, because I felt for myself I lost trust in myself, let alone anyone else that was supporting me, so that faith element of, okay, Lord, if you're saying I can draw close to you, and I'm going to pray this, I don't know if I really believe it right now. I don't know if I can believe the faith that you're saying for me to have. I just say this one thing and everything just wipe out. All right, let's go for it. I couldn't say that I really understood or had the faith to believe that, but I was willing to give myself to it in that sense, from that space of like Layla was saying, just being quite condemned, and you just come to sense, like, almost to the end of yourself of like, nothing else is working. Like, literally nothing else is working, because the more and more I'm doing, the more and more inside I'm feeling so frustrated. And Lord, your word is saying this, and these people are saying that. Like, help me. you do come to just like, I need your help. I know there's better, because I've had times where I've had joy and happiness, and right now I'm not feeling that. So I've tasted what happiness, and I've seen it by people singing and dancing at the front, I've seen this version of freedom, but I don't feel free right now. So for me, it was that trust, and okay, Lord, I need you to take that chance and step forward and believe in this. But that, for me, it didn't change overnight. Like, feeling wise, didn't change overnight. Those feelings were pretty much still there. So I had to learn that it was a process, because of how much I started to embed those feelings into other areas of my life. It was almost like that's now come out of this. I feel like in the same way when we've seen those good things grow, we also have, the weeds that grow with it too. So as much as I had been doing all these good things that seem good, I've had a lot of things that's choked these good things too, that over time God had to really show me, okay, that is what needs to be cut. Actually, this is what you need to us to help you with. This is what you need so-and-so to support you with. You need to listen. You need to actually do what you're going to say. So a lot of that was also just the reality of my character and the question I had before was like, who am I? God was actually dealing with the core of that through my confession. Who am I actually? God's like, you're my child. What does that mean? All right, let me just take you into the royal courts and show you what it means to live in a royal family. I don't deserve this, you know, so all those that came with it.
Yeah, that's no, thanks. This is sharing those, you know, personal things, but I think things that we often go through just in life, just along the way, on the Christian walk. And I have a couple of thoughts on the distant parts. I kind of want us to talk about guilt as well. Like guilt's like a big grey cloud with things hanging from it. That's how I see it. But V, is there anything that we need to cover off before I do that?
No, I'm just it's kind of like if you see me kind of looking up and down, I'm looking because I'm just checking to make sure that everything's okay, you know, because I like the start that we had. I did actually have someone tell me today that it seems like just in general, Zoom has not been fantastic across the board, so that's partly contributing to why we had the issues earlier on. So yeah, so don't mind me if I'm looking up. I'm looking just to make sure that
Zoom will obey.
Indeed, Zoom will have to obey. Indeed, so so no, so carry on. We're good. We're good.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting subject. As I was thinking about it, I think we talk about feeling distant from God, but I think, you know what? It's not so much that we can feel distant from God, we think distant from God.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I was thinking about, because one of the things about God is that he doesn't move. He doesn't go anywhere. And when we get born again, like the Bible tells us that the Spirit of God comes to indwell us and he lives in us. So if he lives in you, how are you ever distant from him? You're not. You think distant, but you're not distant. And I think so much our mind shapes our reality.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's why when we talk about people that suffer psychosis, yeah, we understand from a mental health and medical point of view, it doesn't matter what the reality is. If somebody's having a psychotic episode, their mind is creating their reality and they see that which isn't there. And so there is a corresponding spiritual kind of counterpart to that, where a lot of the times I think we see what's not there, because one of the things that anytime we start to approach God from our own human mind, our sense and reasoning, then we're left with our view of God.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the reality is. And so our mind starts to create our world and starts to create the perception that we have from God. So that I would suggest that our feeling distant isn't so much actually a feeling, it's actually our thought life. And it's that we start to conceptualize and get wrong concepts about God that aren't actually true. And then we start to live by those concepts. So what you kind of have to do is you have to take the word of God and you take your God and you have to switch places and do musical chairs with them. And so the reason why we feel distant from God is because we now start to live by our image of God. You know, another word for that would be an idol. But we start to live by our image of God and our concept and what we think about God rather than what God thinks about God.
Yeah.
And then once we start to live from what we think about God, then it's a spiral. Then we start to live from what we think about God and what we think that God thinks about us. And so we start to live by our own internal Bible, which comes from the mind of the flesh. And so we start to relate to God through that. And of course, there's no life in that. So because you're approaching God through your own thoughts, now it's like, oh, but when I'm talking, I feel like I hit a brick wall. When I try to pray, I feel, well, you would, because there's no life in your words. But because you've made your words God, you're saying, why isn't God talking to me? Why don't I feel God near me? Why do I not feel that I can connect with God? Because you're praying to the God you've made up in your own mind right now.
Or can I say, on that, I think that also as well, maybe for some, I think it's also about what you understand about who he is when you've got born again in the first place. And or even maybe, in my head I had the whole, the ticket under which you came into the kingdom, so to speak. So, for a lot of people, in terms of their experience of being born again, they became aware of the fact that that they're sinners, and Jesus died for that, so that they could become born again and be born into a new life. And depending on what you then begin to understand as part of supplementing your faith, to learn more about, what that looks like, how that works, or if you are maybe listening to or taking in certain teaching chunks and so on, that in a sense constantly reinforce and remind you about where you came from. I think that also contributes even more to that feeling of distance when things go a bit pear-shaped, because so when you just talked about the thought life, in that sense, it's like your thought life to a degree is going to be based on what you already know, or what you've been told, so to speak, about his nature. Because I know, like, there's people that I've come across that are like that, where, whatever it is that's happened, and they feel like they're distant from him, it's almost like they forget that that God actually loved and pursued you before you was even looking in his direction, and so he's not now going to not love you now, kind of thing. So I think that contributes, as you said, to the thought life, is that I think it also has a lot to do with what you understand even prior to the particular event or situation that had you feeling distant from God in the first place. Yeah.
It's a lot about regardless of whether it's what you've been taught, whether it's what you're thinking, if it's not truth, then it amounts to the same thing. It's still a God that's come from your mind.
Yeah.
Because we have it's another subject, but it's why it's so important that we do actually get to know who God is, and know the truth of who he is. Because as I was saying, it is a case of us substituting what he says for what we say, and then running along with what we say, which causes us to stay in that place, and to live in that place. And as long as we are stuck in our own heads, there's no way out. And that's what you guys were saying when I was asking you guys how you got out of it. You effectively had to get out of your own head. You had to get out of what you were saying about God, what you were saying about you. You basically had to get out your own commentary on your life and your situation, and actually start with what God is saying. So I think, in summary on that part, even as I know we kind of want to talk a little bit about guilt, but I think it's when we're talking about feeling disconnected from God, I think if we're going to give any points, I guess one of the important points is that, well, realize that he's in you. So, like, I feel far from him. How much closer do you want to get? He's in you. He hasn't gone anywhere. He's in you. So also, almost that's the first thing. It's like, if that's how I feel, it can't be true. You have to acknowledge, first thing, that is not true. What if you've given your life to Christ? Then you are not disconnected. You are not far from him. So that's because until you realize that truth, you're going to be stuck there. So if anyone's watching, that's how you're feeling, what you've experienced, you're going to have to. It's not true. You are as close to him now as you ever were. Yes, you can grow to know him more intimately, but positionally, you're still his kid. You know, less his kid, no more his kid. You're his. You're a son of God. You know, there are no classes in that. You're not like an economy class son of God. You're just a son of God. There's only one. And then I think from realizing that, I think then what you said, especially later, is true. Then you just have to start to talk to him from a place of truth, from a place of honesty, from a place of wherever you're at. You know, there's no point trying to, you know, there's no point, okay, you've been feeling away, there's no point you're now going to try and create like a Benny Hinn crusade to try and talk to God. Like, you know, you're going to be holy is a, I mean, you're not in that place. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? You're like, you know, pick up that key. Like, no. You know, no way. Because you're not there. You have to speak to him from where you're at. Like, you know, you'll get back to your crusade. Have your crusade later. But right now, you have to speak to him from where you're honestly. You have to speak to him from where your heart is, and not be afraid to actually engage God at the level of, this is where I am.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah.
And that's almost like that's the landing strip for the Holy Spirit to kind of do what he does best. I mean, I think. All right. I tell you what. Yeah, I'm conscious. I know we started late and stuff, so I'm hoping we maybe have another few minutes. We started about half an hour late, so we take another sort of like 15, maybe 20 minutes to just have a quick talk about guilt on the back of that, because I think sometimes what makes people feel distant from God is the fact that, as you guys talked about, that they've done something, they've sinned, they've messed up, especially if it's, I don't even like the term, okay, if it's what in our mind we think of as a big sin, or if it is, if we're stuck in a cycle of sin, a cycle of sin, easy for you to say, a cycle of sin. Yeah. A cycle of sin, a stronghold of sin, that's easy, a stronghold of sin. And there's a particular thing that we're battling, and it's just like over and over and over again. So let's talk a little bit about guilt. And let me ask the question, I'm just going to put this out there. Is it actually good to feel guilt towards God? I'm just going to throw that out there.
Let me say what I need to say, and then I can be quiet until we finish, isn't it? I don't know. I kind of feel like that maybe I'm going to say something maybe controversial. I don't know. We'll see. I think that if you kind of look at the concept of guilt and maybe attach it to words like regret or remorse for when you've done something wrong, just in general kind of thing. So, you know, if you're in a situation or someone that you know, like if they've committed a crime or something, you know, there is
I know people like that.
You don't know people like that, no?
Nah, mate. Nah, I'm saying.
Okay, right. So, so when you or said person has committed that crime or just done something against the law or whatever, there is a sensing that there's something in us that triggers off to know that that particular thing isn't right, and we either override it, or as you said, in our minds we either do something with it that allows us to continue through with what we're doing anyway. So I think that there is my terminology for now is, I think that there is an appropriateness to guilt in response to when we've done something wrong, because it then kind of says to me that, what you're acknowledging that this thing isn't me, or I shouldn't be doing this particular thing. So I kind of relate it in a certain way to having remorse. So I think that there should be a response. There should be some sense of response to when you do something that isn't correct. And then that also, I think, combines with the fact that actually when you acknowledge that you've done something wrong, then you can, that biblical term repent, as in what Layla was talking about, which is to turn from that particular action or to turn from that mindset, and to move forward in doing right things. So I think that there should be an appropriate level. I think where it then doesn't become good, which I think we've kind of said, is where we kind of sit in it, where it becomes self-condemning, that you can't see anything else other than the thing that you may have done. And so you then, like we've kind of talked about, you then begin to live from that place, and you then start to assume or become those things. So I think it's two halves. I think that there is a level of appropriateness as a response to when we do things that are not right. But then at the same time, what that should do really though, it should be that it should cause us to turn and actually move forward in the right things that we should be doing, and not cause us to go further on in it. Because then, to me, that's like something else kind of thing. That's more when you're going into condemnation. So that's why I say that in that context, I think it is good. That's me. I'm leaving it.
All right, go on. I'm just looking for a scripture. You see me looking down, but yeah, go on, guys. What do we think? Guilt.
I think for me, like then it kind of started saying, what is guilt? To me, guilt is a response. It's a feeling to a response to something. The same way that you put your hand in fire, the pain is the response to you put your hand in fire. So for me personally, when guilt comes, it's because there's that internal system inside of me that knows that I've either done or said something that I shouldn't have. Something that is according to my ideology and my way of thinking and my values is wrong. And I think that's quite important, because a lot of people I can do something and feel guilty about it. Someone else can do the same thing and not feel guilty about it. So I think guilt is attached to your values. Values and your standards, in your head, what you see as good, and then what you see as bad. And the feeling of guilt is when what your action sits underneath what your perception based on your upbringing, your culture, society, experiences is bad. And I think as a Christian, it is, like I was giving an example earlier on, Romans 8, whoosh, flew out from anywhere. So there are truths that we know intrinsically. There's nobody can tell you. Nobody needs to tell you. You just know it the same way that children know some things. Like, you don't have to teach a child to fight over a toy with another child. You don't have to teach. It's our nature. Some things that we know, and I think that's it. So that would be the first thing for me, that the guilt is a response to an action or something I've said or something I've done. And yes, I feel that. Therefore, if I feel guilty as a Christian, it means that, because remember, when I said yes to Christ, my value system is now aligned with Christ. my standards is now the standards of God, because that's what I bought. That's the kingdom I belong to. So guilt that I feel now, I take it on as it's a good thing, because it's kind of like an early warning system. You've said what you've said or done something, but you shouldn't have. And like Burnett says, it's when I now partner with that guilt, when I enter into agreement, they get my number, they're my Facebook, they're my WhatsApp, we're friends, we go on holiday together. I am now, that guilt becomes my reality, which means that this thing that I keep continuously doing or saying that I know is against my value system and my standards, I am okay with that. And I think that's where the condemnation and that. So yes, I think that it's good to feel guilty when it's a warning that whatever you're doing or saying right now does not sit with the kingdom life that you say you now belong to. But now when you now override that early warning system, and it becomes, and that noise that it's making becomes your reality, and you're okay with it, partner with it, that's a no-no.
Okay, all right. So very quickly, so moving now. So just another quick question. Then, so hearing what everyone's saying, then, so everyone is saying that guilt kind of is a good thing in a way, or a right response to maybe us knowing that we've done wrong, put it simply. So then, but can guilt ever be too much? Can it ever be overwhelming? And if so, why? What makes guilt overwhelming? If we can cover that just quickly, and then, we'll probably try and sum things up and wrap things up.
I'll go. I got this. No, no, I think it can fall for some of the things that even Layla kind of touched on already, in that I think is when guilt actually becomes, or you assume it as part of your identity, like that's always who you are, kind of thing, as opposed to it being an instance or connected to a moment, as opposed to you wearing that as an identity, as part of who you are. So in the same way that, just as an example, like if someone goes to prison for a couple years, in a sense, that's their identity now, because there was a particular instance, they were found guilty of a particular thing, and that's kind of like what they wear now, kind of thing, until such time when they're released from the system and they are no longer guilty of that particular thing now, because they've served a particular length of time. So I think it can be too much. It can become too much if it turns from being a response to an event or a situation in terms of where things have gone wrong, to where you actually now start to walk in that thing, as Layla was saying, we begin to partner with it and carry it around with you, because then it's now turned into something else. That's what I would say.
Oh, yeah, anyone else?
I was going to say, I think, just I guess to add to what Bennett was saying, I think it does, especially when we've been talking about just the overwhelming flood of emotions, sorry, that comes with sometimes feeling guilty, and kind of all the strands that may kind of now grow from that too. Fear would be in there of what's next. Oh no, what if I fail again? So that fear of failure and the emotions and the frustrations. If something looks like, tastes like, smells like, the same kind of wrong action, and again, you kind of almost paralyze yourself to kind of move forward. So I feel like there's so many different ways where it can be very overwhelming, especially if in your mind you tend to kind of revisit that or see that happening again in different ways. It becomes a strong stench, and I guess I'll give it in this sort of way because it's something that came to mind. So when I was growing up, even now, to be honest, I'm still growing up. One of the sayings that my dad used to have is, don't put icing on top of ginger.
Okay.
That was the sort of saying of like, everyone's in PE or you've been in like school rooms and everyone's all sweaty after a session and everyone gets up there spraying. It's like, okay, I'm putting something sweet on top of something that smells really strong right now.
Okay.
And I'm trying to cover it up. So that's the icing on top of ginger sort of thing. Like, go and bath yourself, because you stink, go, properly, wash yourself in that sense. So just that idea of having something sweet layered over something strong, I think that tends to be, like we've been talking about, the tendency that we have to try and cover up and just, make it smell nice. It's all okay on top, but actually underneath, a bit similar to what we were talking about in episode 1, actually it's really strong. It's actually probably really messy under here. So that feeling of guilt, I liken it quite similar to, if there was something in your fridge that was going off, you might, that smell might be normalized to you, but someone else walks in like, what's this smell? Like something's off in here. And you're like, no, nothing's really off. You do have to, it's overwhelming because sometimes you do have to go and find actually, where is this coming from? What is this thing? And sometimes you have to go through so much other things before you even find the very thing that actually really stinks. So getting rid of that strong stench or that thing that is festering and trying to grow and trying to attack, when mold grows, it starts to kind of latch itself into other things and you have to do a proper clear out before you even kind of put anything back